We made this.
Make It So, a Star Trek Universe podcast, is now on Patreon, where you can support the show's production and gain access to all kinds of bonus features and content. To subscribe, check out what we offer at patreon.com/Make It So podcast. That's patreon.com/Make It So podcast. Thanks for listening, and Helmsman,
engage. I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise.
Michael Burnham, pleased to meet you.
What we leave behind is not as important as how we've lived.
We will continue exploring, discovering new worlds, new civilizations. That is the United Federation of Planets. That is Starfleet.
Make it so.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Make It So, a Star Trek Universe podcast, covering, at the moment, Star Trek Discovery. This week, we are going to be talking about Into the Forest I Go. It first aired on the 12th of November, 2017. It's Season 1, Episode 9. This was written by Bo Yeon-King and Erica Lippold, and is directed by Chris Byrne. The US Discovery orbits Pavo from last week, and we are currently awaiting the Klingons. And to join me to talk about this episode is returning guest Clara Cook. Hello, Clara. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Kurt. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, I've had a good day off work. I've chilled out. I've watched a couple of episodes of Discovery, and part of the X-Files Fight the Future movie, as we're doing the Fight the Future Minute at the moment over on the X-Cast. So I've been a bit busy watching media and watching Star Trek and X-Files, which is not a bad day, to be honest.
Sounds like a perfect day, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not bad, is it? So making plenty of notes and then take it from there. I will say, though, I'll put hands up on, I watched this episode last night as well. And I came to about 20 minutes before we were due to come on air, and I started making some notes and stuff, and I pulled up a couple of bits, and I started reading a paragraph, and I looked at the paragraph and went, "What is that? What? I don't remember that. I watched that last night. I don't remember that scene." And I went back to my Netflix account, and I still had another 15 minutes to watch. So luckily, I managed to skip through it today. So just before we come on air, so I'm up to date now. So how was yourself? How have you been over this this period of lockdown and the eventual? I know we're just about coming out of going down to level 3 in UK as they've now put the new COVID alert systems now out, and we're going from 4 to 3. So, but how have you been over the period? You've been at home for even before the lockdown happened, haven't you?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because weirdly, in my mind, every single time I think of these levels, I see the Nando's spices, right, and yeah. So I'm thinking like level 3, that's like medium hot, isn't it? Not mild yet, but but we're not quite spicy hot. So it's medium hot lockdown. I've been okay. I mean, I have been in a weird situation where I've actually been very, very busy with work, because I am working from home, trying to rehaul all the assessment and all the sort of teaching and stuff that happens, but would normally happen at a university on campus, but is now happening remotely. So it's kind of like dragging a archaic old institution into the 21st century and to modern technology. And that's been actually quite difficult. So I've been watching all the things that people have been doing online, writing novels and baking bread. I've been like, I wish I had time to do that.
I'm in the same position, to be honest. I wouldn't say I've necessarily struggled, because it's great to be able to podcast, but the amount of podcasts that are coming at me at the moment are incredible. Are you going to do this one? And I keep saying yes, and I keep going, okay, so where am I going to fit that in my work schedule? But yeah, I mean, I'm the same. We my company itself, literally just before this happened, installed Microsoft Office 365. They've upgraded to 365, which has Microsoft Teams on. So that was really, really lucky in the fact that we've actually got the infrastructure in place, and we have been doing a lot of video calling. I've been actually on site as well, but these calls have been pretty much daily for the last 7-8 weeks now. So it's it's interesting. But as I say, we're not being able to. Our Facebook group for the company have been baking cakes and all kinds and showing off and what talents they've got, and I'm going, yeah, I'm still sitting at work. Thank you very much. Enjoy yourselves.
I was just saying, it is all very futuristic video calling. It's very Star Trek, actually.
It is, and I tell you what, when Microsoft Teams caught up and put some interactive backgrounds on the thing, we had so much fun. So it's been quite funny from that point of view. There's been a lot of sort of in all the sadness and stuff. There's been a bit of levity with things happening. We were just talking today about cats being in middle of roads while we're talking, and things you don't see during the day when you're at work. There's a couple of people who always have something going on in the background, and it's like, oh, what's going on there? You kind of get a bit little bit of an eye into what people at work do. And my COO of the company was really, really funny. He was at home, and I think this has probably happened to loads of people. And he got to let the dog out, and he obviously was wearing shorts, of course. So that was a good laugh. But also, this day is actually quite an important day for the Star Trek world as well, isn't it? Because at time of recording, 15th of May, we have had the announcement that Star Trek Strange New Worlds is going to be a thing. What's your first opinion on that then, being that Strange New Worlds is going to be a Pike, Spock and Number One TV show? So what are your first reactions on that?
I'm quite happy about it, actually. I think that I do hope that they do other shows that kind of explore like post-Voyager and post-DS9. But I'm quite happy about this because, one, I think the title Strange New Worlds is an excellent title, and it kind of does reflect, everything that everyone's been going through in the last, pretty much most of this year so far. It's been a strange new world for a lot of people. But also, I really... I'm keen to see more of Number One, and I feel like and although I'm obviously a big fan of Pike and I'm a massive fan of Spock was my first basically favorite fictional character of all time when I was a kid, but I am excited to see more of Number One. I'm happy that they're going to explore her more in this new series, hopefully. So yeah.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I mean, I've only seen the newest short treks, is obviously Children of Mars. I haven't seen the ones with Spock and Number One and Pike in them yet. I think we'll have to do some coverage on that because obviously that will have a major impact in where we're going. It'll be interesting to see how they approach it as well, whether or not they serialize it a little bit like this season 1 in Star Trek Discovery, or do they go for a TNG style of episodic? So it'd be interesting to see which way they go with that. Which way would you prefer?
I will admit, I actually would prefer something episodic now. I'm a big fan of story arcs in TV shows. That's one of the things that really drew me to the X-Files. But I'm ready for some episodic Star Trek now because I think we've got a mythic story with Discovery, and we've got that with Picard to a certain extent, although obviously shorter storyline, I know. But so I'm kind of ready for some, episodes where they're going to explore strange planets. I'd actually like to see more aliens, like strange aliens, interesting aliens, different cultures. Yeah. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that though, because what a TV audience, a modern TV audience, is sort of wanting from TV now is a bit different to what TV audience wanted from TOS in the 60s or from TNG, in the 80s and the 90s. 80s. I'm trying to think. I was like...
Next Generation was late 80s, very late 80s.
Very late 80s and 90s. So I was a kid, man. But I actually thought that you were going to say this big announcement, because there's a big announcement that's just come out literally before we started recording, which is that Trump was giving a speech and he's got a name for his... the sort of plan that they have to try and find a vaccine for the coronavirus, and he's calling it
Oh no, don't tell me. Go on.
He's calling it Operation Warp Speed.
Oh, you're joking?
No.
Oh no. Okay.
My husband told me. I literally was on the way up here to turn on my recorder, and my husband told me, and I thought he was joking. I thought he was pulling my leg, and he was like, "No, I'm not." He's not,
because I mean, recently they did the new space agencies like Starfleet logo as well, isn't it? I think I think they did something with the new USA space fleet or something.
Yeah, it was a space something, wasn't it? It wasn't Space Fleet, it was like space. But so Space Corps or something. So I think we can deduce one thing from this, which is that Trump is actually probably a Trekkie.
Yeah. Do you think he'll be listening to this? Do we have a message for him?
We have many messages for him, but they're probably not like suitable for listeners for airwaves.
No, we won't put a triple explicit notice on here. All right, okay, fantastic. Okay, then, so we will be talking about Discovery in just a second, but I also want to just quickly touch upon Star Trek Picard as well, because it's been a long, long time since we last spoke in the Star Trek universe, and that was all the way back to Maps and Legends, which I think was episode 2. So what did you make of the following 8 episodes of Picard? How did you find that? So
I have a confession to make, which is going to horrify almost everyone listening to this podcast. I have not... As bad
as me not seeing all the original series.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, that's worse.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I'm joking. I haven't
We're definitely at the bottom Picard. Of the pile. Have you not? All right, okay.
No,
great.
And the reason why is, this is a really stupid reason, but one, I've obviously been very busy, but 2, like, I kind of don't want to finish it.
That's fair enough. I know people like that.
I'm slowly. This is not like me. And normally, I'm the kind of person that races to the end of a show, or I'm the kind of person sometimes that reads the end of a book before I finish it, because I'm like, just in case, like, I don't know, die while reading this book, or I need to know what happens, or like, I'm not a person I love spoilers. I really do. So I think I kind of know what happens because I've seen people on Twitter talking about it, but. Right. I kind of just wanted to watch it slowly, like really slowly, because I'm sort of stuck in lockdown. So I haven't actually even got to the episode where they go and they meet Riker. And I know I'm going to cry, so I'm just going to hold off until things are really bad, and then I'll watch that and sob.
All right, okay, we'll come back to us when we're looking through season 3.
Next time we record, I will have watched it.
I'll put that as a mark on your sheet, just to say, right, needs to improve. Right, okay. Well, let's dive into this episode then, because this was an episode that was aired on the 12th of November 2017. I'm hoping you've got through to season 2 of Discovery at least.
No, I have.
But we'll take it from there. So, before we actually start, how did... I know we spoke off air about the previous episode, and it's not one that you've rewatched for this recording, but where we are set within this is the mid-season finale. This is the second part, effectively, from what happened last episode with Saru going to the planet, and he basically has this connection with the planet and doesn't want them to leave. The antenna is there for the... to make basically Starfleet want to use this antenna to detect the cloaking system, and what eventually happens is that the devices that Discovery use get destroyed, and the harmonistic planet actually sends out an electronic magnetic pulse through into space, which then calls up the Klingons, and there's 2 signals that's happening. So what did you make to the story up to that point, the way it's left it here? That, we're in a position where Lorca's saying he wants to protect the planet, and he's got nefarious reasons for this, as we know, but he wants to protect the planet and not run away, which is what Starfleet are asking for. How do you think that leads in ready for the beginning of this episode?
Well, it's a very Star Trek dilemma, isn't it? I mean, it's a stereotypical Star Trek dilemma where a starship or a captain has to contemplate defying orders or make a command decision that goes against Starfleet, because Starfleet is basically refusing to do something that we know is morally right or that we know is the right thing to do. It's kind of like how captains break the Prime Directive when they really should, when they're not supposed to, but they really should. So it feels like a very classic Star Trek dilemma to me.
I mean, the way I particularly like it, it's not so much it's intimated in here rather than actually explicitly said, is that Lorca is the captain that we would like a Star Trek captain to be, but he obviously isn't. But they've flipped that element, like you're saying, with it's a typical Star Trek thing, especially with the scenes where he's he's agreeing with the admiral, Admiral Terrell, and they're warping back, and he says to Stamets, effectively make up an excuse. Why can't we use the spore drive? Why can't we get back right now? Because we will come back to this planet. And that's a very Star Trek thing to do, but the way that they flip that around, that makes Lorca look like the atypical Starfleet captain, is really interesting. It's a nice little touch.
I think that one of the things that I thought was kind of strange about the beginning of this episode is Lorca having a very public debate with the Admiral on the bridge.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess maybe because we have to see the bridge crew's reaction rather than him explaining it to them. I mean, another way of doing that would be Lorca talking to the Admiral in the briefing, in the ready room, and then going onto the bridge and kind of explaining the situation to the crew, and then the crew objecting. But that would just be double the exposition, wouldn't it? Which isn't really useful to the audience. So, but yeah. I sort of thought to myself, would Kirk or Picard or even Janeway be having these conversations with...
No, they would definitely take it to the ready room,
Starfleet Command, yeah. Which in a way kind of makes it, I guess, a little bit clear that Lorca, he's not quite the captain that you expect him to be, because maybe hierarchy or the structure of command is different in the mirror universe, and it's okay for people, I guess people don't question orders really in the mirror universe, do they? Just kind of follow them or have them dictated to them. But it's interesting because actually Lorca's kind of a good captain. It's almost a shame that he doesn't just stay in the Prime universe and basically run there. For his own sake, really.
Well, yeah. I mean, because you've got the Giorgio element, haven't you? And so it's it's similar in that way, but unfortunately, doesn't quite play out that way. But I mentioned this a couple of episodes ago that he does actually. He's such a strong-minded and willed person. I know that I've talked before in previous episodes about the behind the scenes. I can't remember who I was talking to now, but we were talking about the fact that Isaacs wanted, like, sort of, he almost had that Sir Patrick Stewart element behind him, that he was like, well, give me some notes. I want to get involved. I want to help shape the character in some ways. So I think that really works well. And as you say, the fact that Lorca actually comes across as somebody who you could imagine being a captain of a starship and, following his story, but obviously we're following Michael and, but it would have been so much brilliant. It would have been brilliant to see him again. I'm
sad that he dies.
Yeah.
I know he has to, but I think it's funny, like, whenever there's a convention and Jason Isaacs is at that convention and fans are like, is Lorca coming back? And he looks at them like, he's dead. We saw him die.
Yeah, anything is possible, though, I suppose.
In Star Trek. Well, there's other universes, I imagine, so he must be somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, but while we're talking about Lorca, then, how do you think that this plays out over the episode itself, actually? Because there's a lot of manipulation over Stamets during this episode. He really does play around with Stamets to be able to get what he wants, which is effectively he wants the research to get to this universe, doesn't he? Throughout this episode, he does manipulate him quite a lot, even to the very last section as well, where he's literally saying one more jump, and Lorca reacts when Stamets says no, I'm not doing any more, and he obviously makes the adjustment so that does happen. But what do you make to the manipulation of Stamets in this?
I think it's really insidious. And I think it's insidious because he's not just manipulating him, emotionally manipulating him. He's appealing to Stamets' intellectual curiosity. It's appealing to Stamets' real sort of passion for science. Like, the reason why Stamets is on Discovery is to explore and to, find new scientific discoveries. And so there's just something really, really wrong about what Lorca's doing. I think that the last conversation between Lorca and Stamets is a lovely conversation, like them standing there with the view of the sort of space in front of them. It's shot really nicely, and then the two of them sort of this grudging respect that they found for each other since the first episode of this season, where they obviously really intensely dislike each other, and they have a more of an antagonistic relationship. And so the fact that they found respect for each other, professional respect, is sort of wonderful. It's a ruse, isn't it? Lorca's manipulating him the entire time, so it's kind of cheapened by that. And I think also the bit where Lorca reveals this map of jumps with using the spore drive to Stamets, and Stamets is like incredulous awe, like, wow, you mean you're also interested in exploring? Like, he just like sort of is impressed by Lorca. He's like, wow, he's actually interested in science too. This isn't just a military exercise for him. But it's a big red flag. It's like a warning klaxon, like wah, wah. Like Lorca's collecting jump data, and he's like there could be many mirror universes, and I'm like, oh, Paul. But it's. I just find it really insidious. I think it's because he's making a connection with this guy, and if he wasn't trying to get him to jump so that they could go somewhere else, and if he wasn't lying, these would be great scenes of these two characters bonding over their curiosity about the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you talk, just going back to Star Trek Picard in a little bit with what you were saying before about you've seen bits of what happens towards the end of Picard. Some of the conversations that have come up here about the fact that have we had too much, or do some people rely too much on trying to be spoiled on purpose? And would it be better to watch these shows as they air and form your own opinions of stuff? Because we've had a lot of information, even the likes of the episode a couple of episodes ago with Cornwell, where she's analysing him, and he's sleeping in the bed with a phaser and all this, and all these little nods to the window and things like that, where people who are really hot on it will get it straight away, or those people who just want to watch it and enjoy and have their own theories about it and stuff, like the Vox stuff as well. But this really it's becoming more explicit. Do you think it was explicit enough, or do you think that they still shrouded it in enough mystery that you're thinking, okay, I can see where they're going? And plus as well, I mean, there'll be a lot of newcomers to the show as well, which won't particularly be that much interested in what a mirror universe might be. So there's still a bit of drama in that sense. But for a Star Trek fan, do you think that there's enough within there that gives you enough hints that that's where we're going?
I think for some people it was quite clear, that he was from the mirror universe, or that he was at least up to something nefarious. I did not see it when I first watched it. It didn't occur to me that he was from the mirror universe. I think Tony maybe got it quite early on from some of the things he said at the time. He wasn't like deliberately spoiling it for anybody, but he had these theories, like everyone has theories. But it didn't occur to me at all. I knew he was up to something nefarious. I felt confused by Lorca's connection with Burnham, like why he'd bothered to pick her out and save her for the Discovery, and keep, save her from prison. And I also was unsure as to why he was so protective over her in this episode. Because he's really unhappy about the idea of her going onto the Klingon ship, and I knew that he was doing something at his chair at the end of the episode when they were jumping. He looked like he was pressing in coordinates, but I didn't think he was a mirror universe captain. And I'll be honest with you, that's partly because I'm not a massive fan of mirror universe storylines in Star Trek.
I said that 2 episodes ago. It's not my biggest. I haven't really seen much of the original Star Trek ones, the original series, and I think because I grew up on Next Generation, that because it didn't have it, I've never missed it. And it was only when Enterprise started to do it that I kind of really got my head around it. Deep Space Nine, sorry. When got my head around it. So it's not a particular strong pull for me in that sense either. So it'd be interesting to see what happens at the back end of this season once I'm rewatching it, how I feel about Discovery and the Mirror Universe, really.
It's also because they only ever go into one other universe. And that one other universe is filled with like
the same people who are in the same place who are just slightly different. That's the way I see it. Good
people are evil, and evil people are good, and I'm not that there's anyone's really evil or good in Star Trek, but you know what I mean. It's like Kira's a like a dictator, and I think it's exciting for the actors to be able to play something different, and I think Jason Isaacs loves playing a villain, so I think. For him, this was probably really exciting and fun. But I remember when I first saw the second half of the first season of Discovery, I remember thinking, Oh, I felt a little disappointed that Lorca was turning out to be so villainous. He almost becomes kind of cartoonish at the end of it. And I was thinking, he's actually kind of an imaginative and inventive captain. And I would have liked to have seen that a little bit more, I think. For a little longer.
And that's why I think coming into the second half of the season, that, as you say, maybe become a bit too cartoonish. I know we could go on for hours about cigarette smoking, man. But that he has the same problem. But I think that if they'd kept Lorca in where he is now and just slightly retooled him once he got back into the mirror universe, I would have liked that more because it's more nuanced. But there's no real nuance, and I think that's my issue with the whole mirror universe and idea. I think one of the conversations that I have had recently as well is that, you know, why didn't we get to see someone from the Deep Space Nine universe and somebody from Voyager, for example, that would mingle together, you know, that would be there. You know, there's those elements too. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves with Stamets. I mean, obviously there's this the concept of the spore drive and him having to control it. I personally haven't spoken. I don't know about Tony because we've been recording independently. But what do you make to the spore drive's connection with Stamets and the storyline that involves it? Because it seems to be that when we first heard about Discovery, it was going to be this Klingon arc, this Klingon war, and it seemed to. But up to this point, it seems to revolve more around the spore drive idea than the actual war itself. And what do you make to that?
Yeah, actually, that's true. They don't spend as much time on the Klingon ship as I kind of maybe expected that they would, or as much time with the Klingons, actually. Most of it, you're right, is connected to the spore drive. The spore drive, to me, I want to like the spore drive. I want to be interested in sort of like mushroom science. I want to be interested in weird scientific ideas, weird science fiction. But the spore drive, to me, feels very much like a convenient plot device, and it has throughout the entire series. And I just feel, I don't know. I think I can just about buy into it. I think when some of the concepts in Discovery I find really hard to buy into, like in the second series with the time crystals, and it starts to get sort of kind of, I don't know, what would you call it, like Doctor Who-ish, and then. Not there's something wrong with Doctor Who, but it's a different kind of sci-fi, and then I'm like, you kind of lost me here. But with the spore drive, I find it's convenient. It's convenient whenever they need to get out of a jam or they need to do something, really quickly. It's like the spore drive, and it's a little bit close to sort of the technobabble that used to exist in Voyager when they're like in a tight spot and they don't know what to do, and then B'Elanna comes out with a whole load of technobabble, it's almost like they wrote in the script technobabble, and like the urban emitters with the phaeton frequency, and you're thinking, oh god, But I do like Stamets' connection to it. I like the idea of a scientist taking the science so far that he's almost become the science
part
himself. Yeah, it's very sort of, not Frankenstein, but it's sort of, a lot like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, kind of, he's sort of, it's like a mad scientist that's kind of gone too far. And I feel like in this episode, he realizes he's gone too far. And the fact that he, at the end, has sort of resigned himself to the fact that he has to go back to Starfleet Medical on Earth and have some tests run because he's actually not really coping with it very well. Yeah,
I mean, it's the opposite to Lorca, isn't it? The fact that he's realised he's gone too far, that he's pushed it, and it humanises him as well, because obviously Hugh's really worried about him, and you've got that dynamic that's in playing up in here as well, that there's real concerns because he's going to have to jump 133 times. And then we've got Culber really, really, really concerned about him. And, eventually, at the end, it's quite heartbreaking when that does happen. But this idea of 133 times, that scene there where they get through about, I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but it is quite a tense scene. And they only get to about number 30 and you're going 100 odd to go or whatever. But I thought that scene was actually quite tense, and it made use of the spore drive in a way that gave urgency to the episode in some ways, which it hasn't really done in the past, apart from obviously the tardigrade, really. And I think that works for me quite well. But I'm the same as you, that sometimes it is a little bit convenient that they can just call up the spore drive and there you go.
Yeah, so I think one of the issues is that they use the spore drive too much. And I agree with you. The spore drive usage in this episode is excellent. So the sort of images of the ship sort of, what would you say, like leaping in and out on different sides of the Klingon ship is, I think, really clever to sort of map the cloaking mechanism or whatever. I think that's really clever, and I think the way they visually look at it, do it, and everything, the way it looks visually is really cool. And I agree with you. I think Stamets sort of like in the chair there in that little chamber, exhausted and struggling and like just trying to get through the jumps, and you've got this huge number of jumps to make, and him basically his physical condition declining. I think it's also a really good moment when he turns and he starts talking about like clearing in the forest, and he starts babbling nonsense, and to Culber, who's sort of watching outside, like he's basically watching his lover, kind of almost die, is really effective. I just wish, and I like all the stuff with the tardigrade, I really do. I just wish that they hadn't used the spore drive to do sort of less serious things. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like they were spore driving everywhere just because it's quick, So I feel like this would be much more effective.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main ones for me would be Kovan 2 when they appear above the mining planet and they protect them. And I think that more could have been made of that, because it became like Discovery, you mentioned earlier, the Discovery became this kind of myth. And it's almost as if that's what they're playing with now, isn't it? Because they're being pushed so far into the future that Discovery is literally like, the secret of all secret experiments. No one ever talks about it anymore. And I do, in hindsight, I do appreciate that there was a lot of like concern with, well, we've never heard of spore drive, we've never done this, we've never done that. And I'm always the one that has a bit more of a pragmatic approach that, well, you haven't seen the full story yet, so you can't, there might be a reason around it. Now, Section 31 is a completely different kettle of fish. But with the spore drive, I do appreciate they are building this story of like this myth of this one starship that had, this some kind of secret weapon. And it links in here, actually. I know that's further down the line, but Cole's really interested in it, isn't it? Because they say they've got this secret weapon that can help win the war, and Cole's really, really concerned about that. And there is some lovely shots in this, actually, when Cole does arrive on the sarcophagus, that you see Discovery in the background, and I actually think that's probably the best that Discovery's looked, just in that distance. But with Cole, what do you think to Cole then? Because we've had Takuvma in the first couple of episodes, and then when we do eventually meet Discovery in episode 3, we don't really get too much of him. We tend to get more of L'Rell, and L'Rell's kind of like the Klingon story arc in some ways. But Cole, in some ways, is quite one-dimensional, and it kind of shows here a little bit, I think. I mean, what do you think to Cole?
With Klingons, I sort of feel, and this kind of goes for Klingons across, like, almost the entire Star Trek franchise. There's, like, standard Klingons, isn't there, that are, like, they're like alpha males or alpha females or whatever. They're all about war and pride and, honor. And they're just kind of like, I sort of like cardboard Klingons. And poor Cole, I don't think it's necessarily the actor's fault, but I think he's not given really much to play with, is he really, in terms of storyline or dialogue. But yeah, so I think of Cole as like one of these kind of standard kind of like cardboard alpha male Klingons, and then there's the Klingons who are perhaps maybe a bit more visionary, and I think like Takuvma's visionary, L'Rell and Vok. I mean, Vok's a bit of an unusual situation, but he is kind of visionary. So there's sort of like Klingons who General Martok, I think, is kind of visionary. They're like Klingons who sort of rise above the sort of the stereotype of their species, and unfortunately Cole doesn't do that.
No, he doesn't. I mean, it's quite effective. I thought that the L'Rell scene was quite effective, really, that, she gets introduced into the house by using the paint, and then he instantly kind of dismisses her in a lot of ways. So I thought that was effective, but it still doesn't really add anything to the character as much as it's just like, well, you're just a bit part villain, really. But Laurel's a different matter. So Laurel ends up on Discovery at this point. She jumps in. There's a few scenes in here, and we'll get to talk about Ash in a second. But Laurel's had an interesting arc right through the season. Really, we saw her early on with Takuma and Vok, and then we get Vok and Laurel, and then we obviously get Colin and Laurel here, and then obviously Ash as well. So she's had quite a bit to play with. So what do you make to her arc as up until this point in the season?
I think it's really interesting. I think it's really fascinating. I sort of feel like she's kind of the brains behind a lot of stuff that happens without being given any sort of control, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which I actually think is kind of pretty common experience for some women. And I think, she's kind of out there making the decisions, but not getting any of the credit for them.
Yeah.
I think that, especially with her relationship with Vok and then with Ash Tyler, who obviously we now know is the same person, I think that's a really interesting relationship. I think it's a really interesting dynamic that I wish it was kind of explored a bit more. And I don't feel was explored quite enough. I think it's really nice as well to see a woman in. This actress is wearing a lot of prosthetics.
Yeah.
And it's this is going to sound really wrong, but they put her in prosthetics. So much prosthetics, but they didn't. Like, she still seems very womanly. Do you know what I mean? She still seems very female, and I think that was really well done. I think that must have taken some effort to do with the prosthetics. But also, she's in these prosthetics, but I feel like she's acting like everyone else out of the park, when it comes to all the other Klingons. Like, she just has more personality. She has more charisma. She's definitely got more of a presence in all this scenes. And she's not even sometimes she's not even got a particular facial expression, but you can just you can see her eyes, and you can kind of tell what she's thinking from her eyes. So it's just really, really well acted. I think in this episode, at the very end, where she's in the brig and Discovery, it's just really eerie, and it's really mysterious. How does she know Ash Tyler like that intimately? I mean, I think you're supposed to think that she had this captor sort of slave sexual relationship with him, but also when he goes to confront her, her reaction is really unexpected. She's almost caring, like, I won't let anything happen to you. I'm going to take care of you, which is not the reaction that you would get from somebody who has, like, tortured or sexually abused somebody. Do you know what I mean? Well, maybe, actually. I don't know. maybe it's like a domineering
Stockholm
thing.
Syndrome.
Yeah, I don't know. But she seems tender with him. And when I first watched it, I was like, whoa, there's something else going on here, because she's not acting like a torturer.
Well, yeah, she even said soon, doesn't she? She went soon. Yeah, it almost feels at that moment in time, it's almost like the reverse Stockholm Syndrome, especially for Tyler. It is Stockholm Syndrome because he's had these visions reawoken within him. He's suffering from PTSD. I have a bit of a problem with he can easily snap out of it when he needs to fire a gun. But, because I'm not quite sure that's how it works. But that's obviously just to progress the story. But the fact that he seems to be, like, he comes to her and, like, kneels before her, as if he's like, I've been seriously abused by you, but I can't turn away from you. I have to feel that to almost feel human again. It's a really interesting, dark, subject matter for Star Trek to get involved in, really.
It's completely, not completely, but it is definitely lessened later. It's definitely lessened later. I feel like the seriousness of it is diminished by the fact that it's not actually him experiencing. Well, he is experiencing PTSD, but it's PTSD of a different kind. It's not actually that he's, a captor. It's that he has actually got a different personality because he was a different person. So, you can kind of explain these memories as being the other side of his personality, the suppressed Vok. And rather than necessarily the PTSD memories of a soldier taken prisoner in war, which I mean, Star Trek does this a lot. It tries to explore mental health or sexual assault or torture, but it puts like a sci-fi spin on it. You know, like Chief O'Brien wasn't actually tortured in a cell. He was, he was, his memories were altered, you know, and you're thinking, why wouldn't you just have an episode where Chief O'Brien is taken prisoner? Not that I necessarily want O'Brien to be abused, but do you know what I mean? Like, just like stop making it so allegorical and just make it what it is. You know, like T'Pol isn't raped; she's violently mind melded with or something. You know, her mind is violated, which I guess is a kind of rape. But you know what I mean? It's like this person has this thing happen to them, but actually no, it's aliens messing with their brains. You know, so I feel in the case of this, I know that they had to obviously have Vok be a spy, but I was like, could you just not explore straightforward PTSD?
Yeah, I mean, I think you get that with the one that jumps out at me is when Geordi gets taken, and he's right at the end when he speaks to Troy as well. But I remember everything, and then he starts to remember. But it's like you're right; it doesn't really deal with it with head on. But I mean, I suppose that's the way of 90s TV. But you know, it would have been nice to see this delve into a bit more, wouldn't you? That to get really dark and you know, to deal with this issue. And you know, I keep referring back to X-Files. I haven't done that a lot on this podcast, to be fair. But that's one of the issues that people have with towards the end of season 8 of X-Files, where, spoiler alert, Mulder comes back. But his abduction isn't dealt with. It's just like there's like maybe 15 minutes of screen time that's handed to it that, you know, he's very kind of off-putting and that's it. And then we move on to the next episode. So there is that element of TV which doesn't really delve into it.
And it's other people's reactions too, isn't it? That's the thing. It's the one thing I would say that Discovery does better than the X-Files did was when Mulder is traumatized, right? And he's obviously acting strange because he's traumatized. Everyone's sort of like, what's wrong with Mulder? Why is it, you know? But at least in Discovery, the way Michael reacts to Tyler's PTSD, I feel is just massively empathic. She's just wonderful. You know, she's supportive. She's trying to reassure him, but she's also letting him talk about it. You know, she stays there with him. I think her reaction to his pain is actually what's one of the nicest things of the whole episode.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to touch upon, actually, because it's something we haven't spoke about, and we've pretty much got through the episode as well. But let's talk about Michael and Ash first, because you mentioned, as I say, the fact that, you know, they go aboard the ship together, and they end up. She sees this breakdown in Ash, and she doesn't want to leave him on the ship. And then obviously we get this conversation at the end where she is being empathic, because Michael's a character that some people didn't really like, and some people still don't like. There is these parts which, you know, she's developing to become more human. She is human, you know. She's been growing up and with different teachings, you know, and you know, to suppress some of this. But she is human at the end of the day. She's lost her captain in Giorgio, who was a mother figure to her. That, you know, she's on Discovery and she's still very kind of stonewalled, you know, being stoic and, you know, putting these walls up. But Ash gets under her skin. I think the main one is obviously the Harry Mudd episode where, you know, we get the replays time and time again, and we get to develop and see Michael in the long game, really. We get to see that over the course of one episode, but because it's played the time and time again, that we get to see quite a lot of development, and we see that develop over that time. But then this one really cements that, and I think this one really goes out the way to give Michael that empathic feeling, and as much as like the previous episode as well, where, you know, she's aware that Saru's something wrong with Saru, and Saru and Michael obviously forge a really good partnership. Along with Tilly as the seasons go on. But this one, particularly for me, I think Michael really does shine a light on how empathic she is. Yeah,
I really love Michael as a character. I think the one thing I would like to see that we haven't seen so much of so far, and maybe we will see it in season 3, although probably not. I think season 3 might be quite a struggle for our characters from, you know, it's the sort of stuff that we already know about it. But I think I would like to see a sense of humour in Michael, because I think that she's very serious, and maybe that's one reason why some fans don't like her. Because she's very serious. I feel like the emotionless aspect of her is, like the culture that she grew up in. And I don't necessarily think that's actually such an issue, because we've had lots of characters who have suppressed their emotions. I mean, we have Data, who didn't have any emotions initially, and he was much beloved by fans and audiences. And then we had Spock suppressing his emotions. You could talk about Tuvok and T'Pol. There's lots of characters who have had to sort of remain very stoic and professional. So I think that's kind of okay. But I think she's, there's almost sometimes I feel like she's got like a little glimmer of humor in her. She has made some witty banter between her and Saru. She has made some jokes, but you never really see her openly laugh, and that would be nice, I think. But I feel like I like her because she's got real depth of feeling. I think you can tell that she's a very loyal character. She's someone who cares deeply about her friends and her family. And I think, and the crew, which essentially is the family in Star Trek, isn't it? The crew of a ship. And I think that's kind of one of the core values of Star Trek itself, is this taking care of the people around you and putting other people first sometimes. Not all the time, obviously, you take care of yourself too. But, sort of thinking about the wider group, and rather than just your own selfish desires, and that's very Burnham. I also love her relationship with Tilly. I think there's potential for a lot of humor there, and I actually wasn't a big fan of Ash, Tyler and Burnham together as a couple, but I felt like they made it up to this point I felt like it was quite forced. But then, obviously, when there's the second half of the first season, I felt like it became a much more natural thing.
Yeah, it did feel rushed. I mean, as I say, is How to Make the Saying This Man Mad, or whatever it's called. That one, because they were replaying the story time and time again, that it was almost like a speedy way of getting that built into the program, and it did feel a little bit forced. But I do feel that this isn't more. It's for me, Michael isn't so much more here that we're building that relationship. It's more that we're looking at Michael's character, and that's what I particularly like about that scene, even though I did actually forget to watch that scene. But yeah, that's another story. But yeah, so I really do. I think that's really interesting, that there's that empathic side to her that we need to see more of, because in real life she's just a bubbly character. The Walking Dead stuff that she's done, that I used to follow quite a lot. I haven't watched too much of the newest seasons. But when she was on that, she was incredible and really good, and stuff outside of it. So she is such a lovely woman, and I'd like to see some more of that come into her character. And I know she's been playing it that way, which is fine. She's a really, really good actress. But it'd be nice, as you say, to see a bit more levity, a bit more humour in there. I think that would really work. So I think, unless I've got anything else, I don't think there's much more to go through, really. Is there anything that you've got written down or noted that you'd like to bring up while I have a quick look?
Well, one of the things that I thought was really, the two things that I thought was definitely worth mentioning was the fight between Cole and Michael, which
yes,
I think
I did have that. That's the next.
Okay.
That was the next question.
And then Hugh and Paul. I think, is this like the second same-sex kiss in Star Trek? It might be the second one. Has there been another one? Because I know there was one in DS9, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's Jadzia and can't remember her name.
Unfortunately, we cannot remember the name of Jadzia's female lover. But has there been another one? There hasn't, has there? So this must be like the second one only in Star Trek history, which I feel like is a long time coming.
Yeah.
But I really wish that we got more of Paul and Hugh. I felt like we didn't get much of them before poor Hugh faced his, I don't know, what would you call it? Like, I guess you can't call it a death, even though it wasn't really a death. I mean, it was kind of a death, but it also wasn't a death. I feel like that. I wish I knew more about them. I mean,
do you think they just didn't have the confidence to do it, to go that far? Then do you think, or do you think that it was purposely done that way?
I think it was purposely done that way. I don't think it's that they didn't have the confidence. I think it's that they don't have the time, because they have a short amount of episodes. They have a storyline to get through. and so they don't have as much time and sort of space for character development.
Yeah.
They don't have 25, 22 episodes to play with, you know. And I think if they had more time and more episodes, then they would be able to explore the characters more. I think that's one of the reasons why we don't really see as many other sides to Michael, because you know and I noticed that a lot in the second season with Michael and Spock. I felt they explored it, but like, I'm all about character development. In fact, sometimes I will actually prefer character development to plot. So like for me personally, I'm like, just give me as much character development, you know, like as many scenes of them sitting in the mess hall talking to each other about random things. I'm totally up for that. I think it's what they used to call like filler, you know, filler scenes. But then it became something that Star Trek did really well. If you think about Next Generation, you know, I mean, even DS9 and Voyager used to do well, but they had a lot more time to do that.
Yeah, character studies, really, isn't it? You know, of a particular person. Episodes like Data's Day, you know, you would never have a chance to do something like that in the modern world, would you? Really, you wouldn't have just an episode to take a breath and to you know, to look at a particular character in that kind of way. I know that we do get, you know, obviously Picard, you know, when it sort of relates to Data's Day and what Data was to Picard and stuff, but and you will get occasional episodes like Stardust City Rag or like the Harry Wood episode, like we mentioned a couple of times, but there's not enough time, as you say, to park something and just literally concentrate on that one episode. Because you think about it as well, the last episode was kind of that for Saru, and there's only so many people you can actually go through, and I think they want to concentrate on a few little bits here and there, and hopefully we'll get to see more of that as season 3 progresses, and we'll see what happens there. Yeah, Michael's fight scene. So what do you think to the way that was portrayed? I know we mentioned briefly about, you know, L'Rell being chucked down. There was also the communicator, which I thought was a nice touch, because Michael does see that this plan is going wrong. Although I do have issues with the fact of the very TNG style sensor reading things that make the loudest noise known to man, but yet no one can hear them. You know, and I understand that they had to get Michael on the ship and they had to give her this moment in time where it's all going wrong. If she doesn't do something, the plan will go. It would just go wrong. It would just go wrong. But so she has to give herself up here, and it also mirrors what happens. Mirrors, see what I did there? Mirrors into what happened with Giorgio, and obviously the badge for Giorgio as well. There is a mirroring of the very first episode, and Michael's kind of arc is closing up with Giorgio as far as we know right now, but we know it kicks on a bit later on. But it's a good way to kind of close up that arc to get to the mid-season, really, isn't it?
One of the things I love about it is the fact that Cole starts to realise that they're stalling, Discovery's stalling, and he suddenly thinks this is a trap. It's always nice when they show an enemy or a villain being a little bit smart. And so that's one of the reasons why she has to basically stall for time, because she knows that he's starting to figure it out and they're going to warp away or whatever. I really like as well also the fact that she is trying to translate. She's translating using the communicator, and Cole sees a communicator as this nefarious thing, and she says it's our way of communicating. She says some line, I can't remember what it is now, but she's like, it's showing that we're reaching out to the world. Basically, this is the universal translator is a way of kind of making connections with other species, not dominating them. And I think that's nice. Like she's like, you know, I'm not going to let you misconstrue this. She's very good about sort of presenting what Starfleet is about, you know, in just like one line of dialogue. And the fight is very David and Goliath. It's real. Like, you know, she is really severely disadvantaged. He's a huge Klingon, and he's really strong, and he's a man. Like, you know, I presume Klingon males are stronger than human females, and then it's really personal because he's the one that killed Georgiou, and he's got the insignia which he's been cleaning his teeth with. When you're like, geez, you know, you need to take this man down. But there's one moment where, in typical villain fashion, and this is not just Star Trek, this is everywhere. You see this in all films and all television shows, where one of the protagonists has like the upper hand in a fight. And instead of just killing that person, they stop and they kind of look at them and they start explaining. And they're like, I'm going to do this to you. Or
they start writing a sonnet or something, don't they?
Like, how dare you? I'm going to take you down, or I'm going to blah, blah, blah. I'm going to have your eyeballs for breakfast, or whatever he says. And he's like lifted her over the banister. He could just throw her. He could just throw her down, and she'd fall down however many, I don't know, levels or whatever to her death. But instead, he starts talking to her. And she's like gives her the opportunity to, like, I don't know, whatever she does, she, like, I don't know, knees him in the groin or something, and to get away.
She stabs him in the leg, yeah. She stabs
him in the leg, yeah. And I'm like, Cole, don't threaten her.
Come on, schoolboy error.
Like, it's like the last thing you'll see before you die. I'm like, what? Don't stall for time. But yeah, it is effective, and I loved how she is transported while falling in midair. I know, it's silly. I know that people being transported while, like, at flight or in movement, and I know it happened in Star Trek Beyond with Kirk, like, jumping through the air.
Yeah.
And I know it
off a motorbike of all things, of course, as well.
Off a motorbike. I know it doesn't make sense, and I also know that people are transported while touching each other, which is never a good thing because you might end up like two Vics, combined. But I still think it just looks so cool. Like, whoo! And then, bing, you're on the ship. What they don't show is her arriving on the Discovery, and that must have hurt.
Do they do that early in the season? I've got this vague recollection that, is it Michael that's in a spacesuit, potentially? She actually lands on the transporter pad, and it's quite a heavy landing. But I know it's not in this episode, but I'm pretty sure. So they've said that in some Star Trek episode that happens, where they land on the transporter pad. It might even be on Beyond, Star Trek Beyond.
It is in Star Trek Beyond, but also I think it also happens in Discovery, right? Because isn't she? Doesn't that happen after Georgiou's killed? Because she's lying face down on the transporter pad, isn't she? Like, kind of like crying.
Yeah.
I can't remember how she ends up face down on the transporter pad. I mean, I also don't understand.
Maybe that would make sense. So if that's the case when they're fighting and she gets transported and that happens, then that would kind of mirror what happens here, wouldn't it?
I mean, basically, it's Burnham redeeming herself. She's avenged Georgiou. You know, her, like, and you can kind of see that at the end when she's sort of. Well, I think at the very end, doesn't she turn? She's in the bridge of the Discovery, and the Klingon ship is exploding, and she turns her face away.
Yeah,
and her whole face is framed by this exploding. I mean, my God, they really calmly watch that ship explode, don't they? They're all like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "This is horrific, guys." Like, I know they're your enemy, but there's probably at least a few hundred Klingons dying there, like, and they're all like,
and I know that the cloaking device has been deactivated, but they pretty much go to town on it. And I've never seen a ship explode like that before when they've had the shields down as well. It is an unbelievable explosion. It really is. But yeah, you're right. I do like the turn away, and that it's almost like that's that part of me now. I'm happy. I've done what I need to do. I do like that aspect of it.
I mean, another thing that kind of I wrote down in my notes, I don't know why this bothers me, is why do people in Star Trek never bruise? Like, they always look like they've just come out of the shower, and you're like, literally about half an hour ago, you were being beaten to a pulp by a giant Klingon. I mean, I know they have dermal regenerators, but did they have them? Did they have them at this point in Star Trek history? Like, I guess.
She had some severe radiation poisoning early in the season, didn't she? Right at the beginning, and she was showing the skin falling off and everything at the beginning. I think they do have dermal regenerators, yeah, but. Yeah, there probably not enough time to bruise, is there? Because they'll just repair any issues. But yeah, but it would be nice to see a bit of bruising here and there, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that we could probably use some of that amazing medical technology nowadays.
yeah, and that itself might get abused and all, though, mightn't it? So, just hide those bruises. Right, okay, so I think that calls the episode to a close and the mid-season to a close as well. So we'll be back next week, though, to talk about the episode 10 of Star Trek Discovery. But before we do finish off, we have a couple of messages on the Make It So, a Star Trek podcast fan group. So we'll just go and have a quick look into there now. Okay, so Tony's been on. He says, Into the Forest I Go sounds like a potential Gump sequel. Good shout. Into the Forest I Go. I'll see that. But yeah, this one's pretty cool, pretty good. Ties up lots of strands for the first half of the season, building up to some nice symmetry for Burnham and fighting Cole. Though I wish the cliffhanger had a bit more explicitly clued in the audience about the mirror universe. Felt like something was missing. But yeah, pretty good. I mean, I thought it was a good amount. I mean, I know we talked about that briefly earlier in the episode, but do you think that we could have had more to clue people in, or do you think there was enough?
Well, is it completely clear that they're in the mirror universe at the end of this episode? It isn't really. I mean, they're just in a different place that has a lot of space trash in it that they don't necessarily know where they are. They can't chart it or figure out where they are, like their coordinates. Though we don't know it's the mirror universe. They could have somehow made that a bit more clear.
Like an ISS ship or something, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they would do that in the last couple seconds of the episode.
I mean, I think from a mid-season point of view, do you really need that? It would be good for Trek fans, but if a general watcher who's only just watched Star Trek Discovery from now, which they are people that have done that and have come into this cold, that just not knowing where you are, I think really works. I think it's enough of, well, where are we? You know, why aren't the stars in the right place, or whatever they're saying, whatever they say at the end there. You know, well, where are we? That's all the question that's asked, and I think there's enough mystery there to make people wonder what's going on.
Yeah, I think. I guess they didn't want to reveal it was the mirror universe because they wanted to leave it with a cliffhanger, and they wanted people to kind of return to watching the show later on. I actually think it's quite a decent cliffhanger. Yeah,
I do. Yeah.
I don't think they foreshadowed the mirror universe that much though, because like I said, when I first watched this, I didn't think it was the mirror universe. I didn't know where they were. So
yeah, unfortunately, I was paying attention to some of the the theories and stuff like that. And to be fair, in hindsight now, and I've tried to do it a little bit more with Picard. I'm trying. I did try not to like review it so quickly and to get tied up with people saying, "Oh, it's this, or it's obviously that." Because the whole Vok thing just kind of ruined it in some ways. And I've talked about that in the previous episode about how far people actually want to take it and actually feel like they have to do that just to spoil the fun. And I think there's a difference between what we do on the podcast, which is potentially go, right, what did you make of it? What do you think, where you think this is going? Then people physically like trawling the internet and, you know, going so far to find pieces of information, not to get clues to go, I've got it worked out. There's a difference, I think.
It's a bit smug, isn't it, really?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Craig McKenzie has been on as well. He says that he loves this one. It's a great mid-season ending with excellent action, strong character work across the board, and interesting teases of what is to come. I do feel that Burnham and Tyler should have taken, I've just read this now, should have taken quieter devices on aboard the Klingon ship, though, which is exactly what I said, Craig. So thank you very much. So thank you for that. And no doubt Craig will be with us in the future, as we yourself. I'm sure that we'll have you back at some point, Clara, but thank you very much. And we'll catch up with you and find out how you thought Star Trek Picard was when you get there. But in the meanwhile, where can people find you online?
So you can find me on Twitter at ClaraJeanMC. I also host a podcast about women and gender in film, television, and fiction called The Tales We Tell, and you can find that on Twitter at The Tales Podcast.
Excellent stuff. So you can find me at the moment on the Xcast, the Fight the Future Minute, which we were talking about before. That was to the X-Files, the film, 1998 film. We're going through that minute by minute on the Xcast. You can also find me on the Time Is Now pod, which is a Millennium podcast. That is coming to the end of season 2. So we should be right at the very end of that now. So we'll be taking a break from there, but that goes up to right to the end of season 2. And that is based on the TV show Millennium, which was a X-Files spin-off. And that was really it at the moment. There's I'm across the network on various different projects, including this one. But yeah, that is basically it for this week. So we'll come out mid-season, ready for episode 10 next week. But before we do go, remember, we do have clips of what's been going on the We Made This Podcast Network coming up. So have a listen to that. That will have some podcasts that we're currently and what people have been up to over the last few weeks. But until next time from us, remember to set a course and engage.
Previously on the We Made This network. The Time Is Now, a Millennium podcast.
Doesn't necessarily need to be. And I would contrast that with somebody like Emma Hollis, since this episode has so much in common, I think, with Sound of Snow. That tone and that character, I think, works so well for the show. In contrast, just highlights even more how Laura Means feels like an X-Files character. To be fair, Season 2 feels a lot like the X-Files, and in that sense, fits in well with... Laura Means fits in well with Season 2.
Life's milestones.
Do you feel like, having been married and divorced, that it's changed your opinion of marriage and how much you believe in this as an institution?
I think the really sad thing is that knowing now how easy it is to get divorced, I think it's so easy to get in and out of it. I mean, it's harder to get out of a contract with O2 than it is to get out of a marriage, and it takes less time.
Wow.
But if I'm absolutely honest, I don't feel that my marriage was particularly well-founded in the first place. And when I did go to see my divorce lawyer, he kind of said, do you have any assets? Do you have anything, that you need to split? And I said, well, no, it's only the kids. And he said, well...
You can't split them.
You can't split them, no.
Well, you could, but you'd be in the nick.
Yeah, exactly.
We Buy Records.
Specialist round. Simon, I've got first up.
Okay.
Your specialist subject, please?
David Bowie.
What's David Bowie's?
It's a big field. It's a hell of a category to bite off.
Oh, I like your psyching, Tim. Psych him out.
Don't
Go
let
on.
him psych you outside. Stare him out.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. Make It So, a Star Trek Universe podcast, was created and is produced and hosted by Tony Black and Kurt North. You can find the show on Twitter at Jean-Luc Podard and on Facebook in the Make It So, a Star Trek podcast fan group discussion group. Check out the We Made This network at We Made This Pod on Twitter and on Facebook by typing in We Made This, and you can find all of our shows on our website, wemadethispod.com. Thanks for listening.